people tend to have different understandings of what local content means. I try to think about it as a series of measures that work towards getting as much value from the oil and gas industry to stay in the country. What do I mean by that? Oil and gas is a resource that under the ground has intrinsic value. Once it comes out of the ground and is then sold or converted to other products, it then has a different value. In between, getting it out of the ground has several steps, and each of those steps has a cost attached to it. Those costs are required to provide goods and services, and local content in the main tries to capture more of those costs. In other words, more supply of those goods and services to stay within the local economy. For that to happen, however, local content requires local capacity, and a part of the local content continuum is capacity building. So oftentimes people think of local content in those separate boxes, and because they're not distinct, it's difficult to measure. What I try to insist is that look at local content, one, as the input in capacity building, two, is the actual capture of value through procurement, and three is using that value capture to create more lasting benefits through developing other sectors of the economy, for instance, linkages downstream as an example for industrialization.
Local content policies allow the state to reassert its role in guiding economic development, and it allows the state to lead through national strategic planning to nurture infant industries with some measure of protection. So to me, the potential of local content is in fostering industrialization and structural transformation. It's a strategy that builds linkages between the oil sector, which has traditionally been separate, has been an enclave, and then the non-oil economy. So it promotes diversification, which is a key objective while we're transitioning into a lower carbon economy. So less developed countries can't really make that transition without structural transformation. And these are policies that generate employment, they build human capacity, so they have the potential to be extraordinarily developmental. The extractive sector is highly capital intensive, especially in petroleum, and it employs only a very small numbers of highly skilled labor. But all that capital is invested in goods and services that make extraction possible. So if you build linkages to the provision of those goods and services, local content can potentially generate tens of thousands of jobs. And it also captures that capital which otherwise leaves the country. And all of this potential is captured by a concept I have of a petro-developmental state, which is a state that effectively uses both the revenues from extractives and the opportunities for local linkages through local content promotion to create a developmental benefit.
To me, it's really the second most important reason to attract extractive industries in the first place. The first one being revenues to the government, tax revenues. To put it into perspective, I think one number that strikes me as quite important in this context is the 2014 BP and Anglo American Total Value Creation Report. So that's the whole value that the company creates, which includes, tax revenues, payments for employees, and also how much they spent on suppliers. So of that total value, for BP, 87% went to suppliers, and for Anglo American, it was 64%. So it's a huge amount of value that goes towards suppliers. And if you as a country are managing to attract some of this value, then obviously that can create a springboard to develop your domestic economy and to also diversify into other sectors, because generally the suppliers get knowledge and technology transfer that they can then apply into other sectors too.
In my view, local content policies, when they are well designed, are just critical if a country wants to reap some industrial benefits from its extractive industries. They are important to correct the market failure upon which the extractive industry project will remain as an enclave, resulting in an inefficient allocation of resources to the market if local skills remain unbuilt and lacking. We can say that most industrialized economy resorted to industrial policies akin to local content policies to promote their domestic economy in the early stages of their industrial development. Developing new industries often requires a nudge from government. The nudge can take the form of subsidies, loans, infrastructure, and other kinds of support. But scratch the surface of any new successful industry anywhere, and more likely than not, you will find government assistance lurking beneath.
There are two main benefits from the extractive resource extraction, and that is first the fiscal take, so taxes, royalties, etc., and then local content, because so the amount of resources that is spent locally is just enormous. And therefore, I think a reasonable and feasible amount of local content should be targeted. And it is sort of a very good way to create tangible local benefits because it's part of the core business of the multinational companies. It's what they're good at, you know. Sort of, it's not some sort of corporate social responsibility initiative, but it's actually something that is integrated into their procurement processes and therefore pretty effective. And it guarantees a social license to operate. So especially in Latin America, I know Faro is looking more at oil and gas, but for example, in the mining sector, there are huge social conflicts around mining, and local content helps to mitigate that. Chile and Trinidad and Tobago, I think, are two very successful examples of local content. So Chile for mining and Trinidad and Tobago for oil and gas. And I think there's huge potential, especially for new producers in Africa as well, to reap some of those benefits.
It is a well-intended policy aimed at maximizing the benefits that local, regional, or even national economies can obtain from the exploitation of the natural resources, mostly through policies that force companies to enroll certain percentages of local labor and to acquire certain percentages of goods and services from national or local provider. So I think it's, in general terms, philosophically or conceptually speaking, a good idea because it attempts to avoid the classical enclave situation in which companies come in, extract their resources, and leave nothing, and dynamize no processes of capital accumulation in the local or national economies. No? Now, of course, as with very many well-intentioned policies, is the concrete experience of the application varies widely within Latin America. The results also vary a lot, and I would even say that in certain cases, experience tells that an enclave solution would be even better than having any kind of local content.
Many countries, as we know, have had centuries of exploitation of natural resources, extracting, and are still underdeveloped. And part of the reason is that taxes are only paid from profits. Profits come after sale of the product and subtraction of the cost that goes in there. The local content tries to do for more of that cost to stay in the economy rather than be given to outside companies. So it matters because countries now recognize that a lot of value is lost through those services. When we look at the spend of oil and gas companies in extracting oil and gas, 80% over the life cycle or more goes to actually procuring goods and services. It means that all that 80% is cost recovery that could potentially leave the country. If you can get more to stay in the country, let's say 20%, that can actually translate to a high amount of revenue in the local economy that can be higher than we can get, for instance, by increasing taxes. In addition, in providing those services to get that resource out, companies in local economies, local companies, have a chance to improve their capacity. we must remember that oil and gas companies use world-class services, world-class processes for accounting, HR, health, and safety. And then their suppliers would raise their standards. And they make the supply chain that provides the oil and gas sector. One, local content allows us to capture more value, to retain more value from the resource within the local economy. And two, to develop services that can benefit other sectors of the economy to raise their quality of standards. What local content requires is an investment in capacity building, meaning there may be costs upfront that is recoverable over time. But that cost will go into improving the productivity and the quality of local services that will then bring their costs down. So there's a trade-off there. And that is why countries and companies need to think of the oil and gas industry not on a project-by-project basis, but on a program basis. So that the first project, for instance, may have an investment cost that is not necessarily covered over the cost of that one project, but over several projects it can be. So again, you can't become competitive unless you participate. You can't participate unless you give them a chance. Initially, give them a chance, you have to develop skills. That development of skills requires an investment of time and money. So any local content policy must include a policy on capacity building. And that capacity building will be seen as an investment that will be recouped over a program of activities over a longer time rather than on a project-by-project basis.